DIY Try or Buy podcast. So on today's episode, we're going to talk a little bit just amongst friends, having a conversation amongst friends about our sons, what we want for our sons. This could get a little deep, but we're going to touch on this a little bit about like what do we want for them, their future, what do we want for them now as they develop, and you have a young man already.
As boys of color, yes.
Yeah. How can we be the parents to kind of give them what they need?
Absolutely, yeah.
This is a big one. I think being a parent is a huge responsibility.
With no manual.
Yeah. If you have one, send it this way.
Please send it, because I need it.
I need to read up on some chapters.
Woo.
So we kind of talked a little bit about, our upbringing, each of our upbringings as well, and our experiences with our, parents, how we were raised, the expectations. Like a lot of people in Asian culture typically has like a very dominant parent and one that's a little bit more passive, and that's very much how the dynamic that I kind of grew in. They were both parentals, but let's be honest, I have an Asian mom, okay? Enough said. Asian American, Asian community, I have an Asian mom, a Korean mom. So I think when I think about like my son in the context of how I was raised, what was expected of me, I do want different. I do want to be a different parent. For him, I struggle with it because there are times where I feel like the ways that I might trigger him are the same ways that my mom maybe have triggered me. And maybe I have some residual trauma that I'm working through of that. And I'm like very conscious of it. So I think we've talked, clearly my mom immigrated to the United States. There were tools she did not have, language she did not have. She had to learn and access it. And so, when she raised her kids, her two daughters, I think there was a lot of fear based in raising kids. And I think that did come and get displayed throughout my childhood. Obviously, there are some things that I don't want to repeat, and I want my son to have a different experience. So I'll kind of just stop there. What are your thoughts right now?
Like you said, we definitely grew up differently. Raised in Detroit, spent a lot of time, and also lived in Akron, Ohio. When I think of my son, he's 14. I know your son is 7. He doesn't live like me. My son, he really doesn't have a lot of people of color that he plays with, that community that I grew up in Detroit. We would go outside. We were forced to go outside, could not come into the street lights came on. We enjoyed each other's company. We didn't have the access or even the technology. We had Atari and Nintendo, but that's all we had. But, now outside is at his fingertips. Like, he doesn't even want to go outside unless I push him, like, go ride your bike, go do something, right? So the dynamics is different. Also, my mom and dad were never married. My dad has always been in my life. We're close. So my mother was a single parent, and my grandparents helped to raise me. So living in Detroit, I've seen two sides. So living in Detroit, I know what community feels like. Right? I know what it's like to have card parties and be dancing in the basement and listening to Luther Vandross with the family and seeing my family just having a good time with each other, right? And Jackson has never been able to experience that because a lot of my cousins that are my age went to college. A lot of my family members didn't go to college, and then we moved, right? We wanted to find something better. And then once we left Detroit, my mother got a better job in Akron, Ohio. So then I was placed in this school where I was the only black kid of 68 kids in my graduating class. So I got this great experience as a kid with an all-black community. And then I was kind of put into a lily-white area of Cuyahoga Falls in Ohio, where I experienced so much in regards to racism, swastikas on my lockers. And it was really, really bad, right? So as we talk about what we want for our sons, it hurts me as a mom because the things that I wish he could have, he can't. Because we're just not, our community, we're in the burbs, right? But I know what I want for him may not be what he needs, but I have no problem with sharing the experiences I want him to have as he grows up and falls in love and gets a job. And I think as a person of color, there are certain things that we experience that white people don't. They don't get it. They can have empathy. But there are sometimes I can walk into a room and we may see something that's kind of shady and I don't have to say a word. I can just look and be like, and the other person of color be like, it's that unspoken language, right? For me, having a black son, you know, you look at Trayvon Martin, you look at all the boys that have been murdered for no reason. I'm worried. I have a fear. Like, I live in this neighborhood and my neighbors, most of my neighbors know me, but he can't ride on their lawns. I don't want him knocking on nobody's door. There's certain things he can and cannot do. I'm like, you're not, you know, I won't say the kid's name. You're not him. He's white, little white boy. You can't do what he does, right? And I'm not just saying it out of just fear, right? I'm saying this from experience and not just from my childhood, but experience right here in my community.
Facts. These are facts.
I'm in an HOA. We have a Facebook group and it's real up in there. I mean, it's real. I mean, the things that I see as it relates to kids just being kids, they only picture our black kids. Your kid did the same thing, but it's an issue when a black kid does it. So for me to have him do what their kids do, it ain't happening, right? So with all the experiences I've had and all the ugliness and the goodness I've seen in the world, having a black son for me is just different, right? And there's a certain way he has to move in the world. I think his dad and I are doing the best job we can because we didn't have perfect homes, but I give a shout out to my ex-husband, Derek. We do a really good job of sitting him down. You know, Jackson is starting high school this year, and we let him know, like when he came back from Chicago, we sat him down. We told him, look, this is what it is. You can't do this, you can't do that, and that's a private conversation. We'll leave that. But we just let him know you black. You black. So don't forget that. You may be hanging around everybody else, but there are some things that, you know, you're just not privy to do. So what I want from my son is, I think, are these kids right now, they are a generation of, I don't want to say lazy, but they don't know hard work. They don't know what it is to struggle. Like, he is so spoiled. My kid, he's spoiled. He's spoiled. My son is spoiled. And, you know, I have a lot to do with that because I think sometimes when we grow up a certain way, we don't want our kids to experience what we've experienced. So we put in our head, when I have kids, I ain't never gonna let my kid do this, and you ain't never gonna go hungry. But there was no balance. I think our balance was off with Jackson, right? But what I want for him, in spite of all of that, he's a kind child, he's a kind soul. And I just want him to, I really do think about his mate, I do. When he meets someone, I want it to be where he can come home and have a certain level of peace. Like when he's having a bad day out here in these streets, like with any job, you know, when he's a teenager or when he gets married or whatever. If he gets married, he said he's never getting married. But I want him to come home to a woman who understands his struggle. Because, you know, we talked about this before. As people of color, we put on this song and dance, and we put on these, I don't want to say masks, but there are certain things that we have to do in order to survive, especially in corporate America. So when he comes home, I want him to be able to have a woman where they can understand what he goes through, and he doesn't have to explain it. Like, they get it. Because if you're going home, where else can you feel at peace? Where else can you have that respite, right? So as a mom, I'm concerned, like, but here's the thing, because I'm not an idiot, because I know where we live, he doesn't have the community that I wish for him to have, right? So I have to be very conscious about activities, church, being around our community, activities, being around our community. But again, you can love who you love, but if you were to ask me, I would prefer him to be with a woman of color, a Black woman. Mm-hmm. I just want that for him. Mm-hmm. But if he doesn't want it for himself, that's fine. But that's, as a mom, that's what I would want.
Do you think that would be easier?
I think it would be easier. Mm-hmm. Easier, not in a sense, because we all have, here's the thing. Everybody as people have their own issues. We, as people, period, not even dealing with color. But if it was just, it's not just a Black woman. I want her to have certain attributes. I want her to be educated. I want her to be cultured. There's some things around that. But I think it's just, just like other cultures when they have arranged marriages, they understand the dynamics of being within their community. They know when you go outside the community, you're already going to deal with things. But when you're in your community, it lessens the issues, the dramas, the noise that you deal with. So, yes. I don't think it's going to, looking at it now, I don't think it's going to happen. But that's just something that I worry about him, because it's not just about who he dates, it's the parents. And we got to worry about that. Like, okay, what kind of background is this? It's just a lot. But I will say, if I were to have a baby now and you were to ask me the same question, I probably wouldn't care, because I think that now we're becoming such a melting pot. By the time my kid, if I had it now, it'd be a totally different situation. But the climate that we're in currently, yeah, mm-hmm. I need him to.
Yeah, I think I can really at least appreciate like where you are coming from, mm-hmm. right? Because like I'm in a biracial marriage, mm-hmm. right? Like
right.
married to a white man. And I think about that with our son because he is of mixed race. And I think about, how he's going to grow up differently than how I grew up, right? Will his challenges be similar to mine? I think when I was pregnant, I thought about, oh my gosh, is he going to get teased at school? Mm-hmm. Are people not wanting to play with him because of what he looks like, right? All the similar things that I grew up in. And there was a moment that I was like very, very scared, because where we live, it's like how I grew up, there wasn't an Asian community. We had to drive to St. Louis to church for a larger Asian community. Mm-hmm. Other than that, there weren't any, there really weren't. There were like 3 families, right, that I knew. I think what I want for my son, and, I think back to what did we not have? Mm-hmm. What was the environment safe, and this is not a diss to my parents and how they raised me, but again, it was a different time, mm-hmm. right? The resources were different.
Right.
Mental health wasn't something that we talked about openly and freely and explored and encouraged like mm-hmm. it is more accepted now. And so I think, the pressures that I had, the choices that were made for me, I think we talked about this. Parents, when they didn't have all these tools, so it was always, we were told what to do and not being shown. Mm-hmm.
You do what I say.
You do what I say, right? I'm going to be honest, that's not working with my son. Right. It's not working all the way. Mm. Yes, there are boundaries and there are rules that you have to set for their safety. Mm-hmm. But I think, as I think about what do I want for him, I really question what I want for him. Again, is it what he wants for himself? Mm-hmm. Do I want him to figure out and give him the space to grow so that he can make these great decisions? And that stems for me of that so many of my decisions were made for me mm-hmm. for a long time. Whereas, I see other kids like they're able to explore, and I think that's why I'm so conscious of exposing my son to different things, mm-hmm. And different ideas and different careers, because it was like very tunnel vision for me. And this is what you should be doing because you are of, you know, this ethnic group, like, you know, these are the careers that you have to choose from. And it's like, no, like, I didn't realize that until later, and I can make my own decisions. And then I really, you know, made these decisions of career switching and things, and I realized how powerful it was for me to get the confidence to make the right decisions for me. I don't think I ever got that runway growing up as a child. And again, I'm okay that I didn't get those decisions. Like, I made it out okay, right? But I also know that now we're raising kids in a very different era. There's different technologies, access, games that, you know, are helping them to mature faster than we did, you know, and it's scary. I have a 7-year-old. It is just scary, right? Like the games, and he's like, somebody's trying to be my girlfriend on this game. No, they're not. Let me show me this. Let's talk. And so I know that I can't control all the external factors around him. It scares me, but at the same time, I want him to have this freedom to explore and make decisions. And he's like, he's 7. No, there's some choices that he should be able to have and start to have those steps of critical thinking.
Yeah.
I do worry for him, though, because we are in an area that's just not diverse. And I remember writing, before he started preschool in this area, we moved from, you know, the city to this area. It doesn't have a lot of people that look like him, or even, you know, it's homogenous, very homogenous. So it's growing, but still, I remember writing to his pre-K teacher before he started that I was, you know, I want to make sure that there are diverse books in the classroom. And if there are not, what can I contribute to the classroom library? Because, you know, him seeing diversity was very important to me. Like, it was like, what do I do? What do you do when you go into a new space or a room, in a workplace, wherever? What do? Scan. We scan. Who's around us? Will this be safe? Will I have somebody that I can talk to? Like, I share this with a lot of my colleagues and friends. Like, the closest people from work environments, even personally, have been women of color, people of color. That's who I typically will gravitate towards, because there's some, like you said, there's this underlining understanding. Boom, you scan a room and like, ooh, she's gonna say hello to me at least, right? Like, I feel like there's like, I've been in these spaces of being the only. They're not fun, but unfortunately, I'm just used to it.
Yeah.
We're like numb to it, right? We've been in these spaces that are numb. I think about how my son will be the only in a space, in a classroom. And he is now, right? Like, he just finished first grade. So he's a class of like an only that looks like him. And I wonder, I hope he can navigate it better than I did. I hope that there are these resources and tools that I know now that we can talk through, because I wasn't talked through, like, how do you feel being the only Asian person in your class? Like, no, like, there's vivid moments of like being in high school. I will share this story. My sister and I happened to be in the same geometry class. I was a freshman, she was a sophomore. And, you know, our friends know who we are. We've grown up together. And our teacher, our geometry teacher, like, it's the first day class. Oh gosh. We sat alphabetical. My name starts with an M. My sister's in an S. So I'm literally in front of her. She's behind me, right? And like, we're taking roll and all that. Out of nowhere, the teacher stands up and like singles out myself and my sister. And she was like, speaking very slowly and very loudly, and says, I want to be able to communicate with you, and so if you have any questions, please raise your hand. And this was second semester, so I was ranked 10th in my class, so clearly I knew how to speak English.
Right.
I took, like, you know, freshman English,
Right.
right?
Duh.
But again, she didn't even take it upon herself to ask her other peers. I taught in K-12 for 10 years. She didn't ask her colleagues when she saw the roster, right? She made an assumption that we couldn't speak English. And my sister and I, I remember turning around and being like, I won't mouth what I was thinking because, Felix would have to bleep it out, but y'all know. And my friends were like giggling because they could not believe it. And my sister was like, I won't name the teacher, right? I'm not here to like blast her, but
you can tell me after this episode.
Yeah, it's for our Patreon. But she was like, Mrs. So-and-so, we were born in the United States, so we can speak English.
You said that, or your sister?
My sister did, right?
Oh, wow,
and
okay.
she, right? Like, I was like, come on, sister, But I remember the teacher being absolutely mortified, as she should.
As she should have been,
as she should. And I know this was like decades ago, late 90s. That's the time frame. And she was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. You probably speak better than I can," right? I just remember her like being mortified. She did apologize, but at that point, just give me my A. I'm done with you.
Right.
Well, first of all, I would have earned it.
Right.
Let's be honest. I earned it. Thank you. But I was done. I was like, I was done. But again, those were the normal experiences. So I do worry about, will my son, I hope that we are farther along, but knowing where we live, that is a very good possibility as well. I do get that in my neighborhood sometimes. There are some microaggressions. And macro, right?
Macroaggressions, yeah.
I think people aren't aware. They're really not aware that they have these unconscious biases, and it comes out like pretty harmful. And they don't know that, right? They don't know that it can be inappropriate, harmful. But again, I go back to, I'm just so used to it. I know how to deflect. I know how to address. I know how to ignore, because I don't have time for you. I don't have the time in the day to constantly recorrect, educate you, right? Like,
but I think to your concerns as a mom, it is more or less, it's more psychological safety, emotional safety, and mine is is psychological safety and safety, period. Like safety, period. So for me, Jackson thinks I'm just like, Mom, whatever. But there are times like I will show him the news and I'll show him what's going on in our community. He, again, he's a teenager, so he doesn't have a lot to say. It's just what's going on in school. Oh, it's okay. I mean, he's just a teenager. But I'm praying, my prayer is that he's soaking this in and understands why I'm so concerned and why I feel the way I feel. Now, I want to be clear, because I know y'all gonna come for me for what I've said, but I'm a fan of Black love, but ultimately I'm a fan of God's love. So whoever he chooses to love, that's on him, and I'm for it. I will love who he loves, because that's my son. But again, my concern and what I want from him stems from what I see, what I know, right? And I think one of my biggest regrets as a parent, I think when we watched the Jeffersons growing up, moving on up, that we wanted to be successful, right? But we forgot about the jewels, the things that we learned within our own community, and we left it behind. And it's hard when you're here in the suburbs, especially if you don't live in the city that you grew up in. It's hard to find that community. And so sometimes I beat myself up like, man, I should have done more. I should have gone harder to get him immersed in our community, because I just really sometimes feel like he's like a fish out of water. Like when we go certain places, he just doesn't know how to move. But yeah, I just wish he had those experiences that I had. When we go home and see my family, I mean, he can't even get it now technically because my family is so diverse. He technically couldn't really get it unless we go like to Detroit home. But like when we go like to Maryland, I have my aunts are white and they're mixed, interracial, whatever. Family is family. But sometimes I just wish he could feel what I felt, because when you have been beat up and you don't have anywhere to go, it's always cool to go home. You always need a place to go home, and outside of mama, but other people that look like you, that, you know. So that's a great grab for me.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like you said, there's something about also being forced to build your own community.
Yeah.
I have a friend, shout out Patrick Armstrong, Korean adoptee, and I've watched Patrick, oh my gosh, growth in such a short amount of time of rejecting an identity. An adoption story, what I've learned is it's not always about what we hear is the parent side, that we saved you from your origin, your country of origin. We saved you. Somebody didn't want you. That's not always the case. And what I've learned through Patrick's journey and story is that there are people that have to go in and reclaim their community or find a community or build an absolute new one, right? And I think about like our sons, they're going to have to build their community too. Like I'm still building a community here, right? I find these new groups in our area, and I'm like, I didn't know there was a group of Korean American people that got and just ate food all the time. I want in, right? Like, 'cause I'm gonna eat. But again, like I think about the tools that maybe my parents didn't have, and I really reflect on, am I going out to seek those tools that are a little more readily available so that I can do more education myself and keep exposing my son to the community I hope, right, he identifies with as he grows, because he may not. Just because we look a certain way doesn't mean he's going to claim that identity. That's true. That's right? True. And that's kind of deep there, because there's a point, like not that I rejected it, but I wanted to be distant. I saw things, we talked in a couple episodes before, but I'm at a point, and like I'm really reclaiming, like, what are the identities that I really want to be strongly a part of, and keep building my authenticity within that. I guess my hope for my son is to find the confidence of his own voice, right, through growing up. And I hate saying this because, make decisions for himself, and I hope that I can give him that space where he feels comfortable. I will share this because there's a couple of triggers he'll say, like he'll be like, Mom, don't get mad, and it triggers me because I'm like, oh dang, if he's saying that, that means like I must be reactive. That's the parenting that I grew up with, very reactive parenting, where what that did was I was inward. I had a lot of thoughts going on. I could not express myself because I already knew what the answer was. So it was easier not to share emotions, opinions, my own thinking and thoughts. And again, you talked about, you hit it, psychological safety. I don't know if I really had that until I was on my own and had to seek it out myself.
It's a thin line, because these kids, well, I'm gonna say all kids, but these kids get triggered on anything. I mean, you could just tell them one thing and they're like, oh, I mean, it's just so fragile, right? And it's hard because my mom, I got whoopings. I didn't get a lot, but I was talked to firmly, and I was like, whoa. But yeah, they're different. I just think these kids, there's just a different kind of kid.
And that's what's so hard about parenting.
Yes,
them.
And he has a therapist. He has, a therapist that you know about, who's a Black man. But I want for Jackson is to be around Black excellence, see it and be it, because he doesn't see it. He doesn't have any. Thankfully, his middle school didn't have any Black teachers. Like, nobody was Black but the police officer. Nobody. That was a problem for me. But his high school, I was like, okay, we're not gonna do this. I'm going to his high school. We're going to figure it out. Went to an open house. I talked to one of the principals, because now they got like 3, 4, 5 principals in schools now, which is crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I talked to him. I said, I was like, look, these are my concerns. If he can't get what I need for him to have as a Black boy in this community, I will either get him homeschooled, or he's going to go to this one down the street with all the Black kids. So he reassured me that there were clubs, there were support groups, there were resources for him. It's in a great school district. So I'm like, okay, we're going to try this out. Because at the end of the day, I can always pull him out. But for me, I want him to be around Felix. He has a great dad, but I'm a single mom. So I'm always trying to search for him to see Black excellence because he doesn't see it on YouTube. He doesn't see it in his community. The community he does not see Black excellence. So luckily I am afforded the privilege, I should say, of being around colleagues and a network where I can say, hey, can you do such and such and such, or can we get involved in 100 Black Men? Can we do something to where I can get him in, so he can see Black excellence, right? But I want him also to know that Black is beautiful, because another thing that could be a whole nother episode is that I don't think he really thinks that Black is beautiful, because again, what he sees on YouTube, how he sees us, how we're portrayed in the media is not beautiful. It's girls twerking. He's not seeing really educated girls, little black girls in school. It's a whole, girl, we can talk all day. But yes, I want him to know that Black is beautiful on all fronts. I want him to see and become Black excellence. And I just want him to be loved. I just want, for every Black man, my prayer, I just want y'all to have peace. Because I don't know what you go through, because I know it's different from being a Black woman, but it's hard raising a little Black boy. It is, I'm just doing my best. We out here trying to, and I pray.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So I think, thinking about, what we want for our boys, it's always rooted in love.
Always.
Please be kind to other parents. Please be kind.
Be patient with me.
Yes. You are enough. Very timely. But, it stems from, and look, no one has the right answers, but it's tough. It's tough parenting, and I think we do the best that we can with what we have, and we try to seek out others and resource. But to me, what's so healthy is having these types of discussions and to hear other perspectives about raising children and coming from a place of listening and not reacting. Because we are all going to parent differently, and that is okay.
Yeah, and if you don't talk about it, how are you going to get help? How are you going to know if you're right or wrong? You need to have a community where you can feel comfortable about, am I doing this right? I'm not saying I'm doing everything right. Maybe my opinion could be totally wrong, but talk to me about it. Talk to me about it.
Absolutely. And I have learned, the perspectives of what you want for your child and the reasons why. And I think to hear that from other people and perspectives and points of views from other people's lived experiences, that's just powerful to kind of sit in and become more aware that parenting is very difficult. But together, having these dialogues, I think you can come to an understanding and learn more about your own parenting as well. So, yeah.
So if you have any parenting tips for us, please let us know in the comments or send us an email. But I enjoyed this conversation with you.
Too.
Yeah.
We do have these, and we, so
not on camera.
not on camera, but I think it's just really great to be open and willing to listen to others' perspectives, stories, the why.
The why.
It's very important
why.
Before you judge any other parent. Understand their why and why they've moved the way they've moved with their kids.
Yes.
You never know
that part.
That part.
So,
yeah. So hopefully you enjoyed the episode. Please like, share, subscribe to the podcast you didn't know you needed.
Bye.